On today's guide, learning to read os Gaeilge. Is it much different from learning in English? Bills, bills, bills. A really useful guide to understanding and paying those household utilities. And more handy hints on how to fill out forms.
Irish is meant to be the first language in this country, but in reality, most of us rarely get a chance to use it every day. The language we now know as Irish came to be spoken in Ireland nearly 2,500 years ago. These days, the government views modern Irish as an important part of our heritage and has made commitments to support and encourage its use day to day. Irish is now an official EU language, which means that we can get official documents in Irish if we want to. Over the last few weeks, we've been meeting people who've been learning to read and write in English. But here's a look at someone in Connemara who's learning through Irish.
Connemara man Owen O'Thursing started work in the printing trade when he was 16. As a native speaker of Irish, he feels right at home working in Clodori Lurgan in Galway, where the working language of the company is Irish. Owen left school with difficulties with reading and writing, something which caused him some anxious moments when he first went to train as a printer.
My course in Bourne Street was for a lithographic printer. We used to be up there for three months a year. We went to Bourne Street every day. It was class in the morning and it was practical in the evening. When the teacher would ask you to read something, or he'd ask the class to read something out, well, he'd be passing the book on to read about something about printing. I'd be getting nervous, so I'd have to get up and go out to the toilet to get, just so that you'd miss the book coming to you, so that nobody'd find out that you had this problem with your reading.
Owen eventually decided to go along to classes to improve his reading and writing in Irish. His local adult learning officer matched him up with tutor Noreen Rafferty.
When Owen came to me first, he had interest in recording some of his own stories and writing those. He had an interest in creative writing and we did some work on that. And he was also interested in learning to text. That was one of the first things we would have tackled.
She taught me how to text then in Irish, which is very interesting because I wasn't able to text in English even. So then I started texting in Irish and she just showed me basically on her own phone how to do it. And when I seen it a few times, I got to know it, got the hang of it. It's nicer to get a text in Irish than in English. It's more natural. So you feel good when you text somebody in Irish and you get an Irish reply. You're more at home with it. When we were young, my father always used to be telling us stories, and my mother as well, about their adventures in their life and about the stuff that happened on the village when they were young. With my own children then, I was doing the same thing, so I wanted to write it down and I wanted to put it in a book form. But I couldn't do that unless I could get to know how to read it or write it a little bit better than I was. So I wanted to improve on that. Noreen helped me to spell the words, to pick them out and to use the dictionary. And very nervous as well when Noreen pulled out these two big books and she says to me, "Owen, you can look it up there yourself," and I look it up in this one. And I was looking at this thing. I was afraid to use it. But once you start using the dictionary, it gets very interesting, very easy to find your words.
As well as being a tutor, Noreen Rafferty is also the national coordinator of BRACA, an adult literacy project for native speakers of Irish. BRACA doesn't run literacy courses itself, but it provides support for those who do.
We provide training support to tutors and we also create and publish learning materials for use in the various classes that the VC provide. We would produce them in the three main dialects. For instance, in the Donegal dialect, where something would be Rudinteacht, it would be Rudakeench in Connemara and Rudagan in Munster.
I started going to a writer's circle, which I never would dream of going, even 2-3 years ago. I've published a play and a poem, and Pádraig Ó Caoimhin, he was the resident poet in UCG, and he published this book, and I'm in the book with another few people. He told me to write a little bit about where I was from and my village, and I did, and he put it in, and it was just it was magic to see it in print.
There are a lot of jobs in the Gaeltachts, probably particularly the bigger Gaeltachts, say Donegal, Connemara and Kerry. There are a lot of job opportunities there, and that are not available to people unless they have basic literacy skills. So obviously that's a good motivation for a lot of people to come back into the system.
Ever since Owen made his decision to improve his reading and writing, he has been keen to inspire other Irish speakers to do the same. And he knows how hard it is to take that first step.
People are not going to come up and say, I can't read either. But they see you and they know that, well, at least there's somebody else in the world that had a problem with it, and he's not afraid to admit it. It's just you have to do the first step yourself. You have to say, listen, I don't understand. So, and then when you do that, it's easy after that.
Well, we're joined today by Grace Deany, who's originally from Glasgow and who's currently studying her junior cert in Irish. You're very welcome, Grace. And also by Dr. Tina Hickey from the UCD School of Psychology, who lectures on teaching Irish reading. Grace, starting with you, what prompted you to return to Irish?
Well, in a way, I've been lucky because although I was in Glasgow, my parents were fluent Donegal speakers, so I would have that basis. So when I came over here to school, then I didn't have to study Irish as a language, so I just feel now I would like to study it more.
So it was something that was encouraged when you were a child, but...
Yes, well, they would speak to me in Irish and I would answer in English, which is, I know, terrible. But that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And because actually a cousin of mine, we were discussing this, and they said they thought Irish was all commands when they were younger. It was like, you know, it was nothing nice or kind was ever said, you know, as children. So I'm very lucky now that this course became available and I have gone back.
And what prompted you to do it? Was there anything in particular?
Well, the fact that the course was there,
yeah,
you know,
it was an opportunity.
I don't know if it's ever happened before for adults to learn junior cert. And a few of my friends and I decided we would go. And first of all, we did start for the kids to be able to help our kids at home.
Okay, homework.
Yes, their Irish sentences. But now we enjoy it for ourselves.
And it is a Gaeltacht area, isn't it, where you live?
Yes.
So is that part of it as well, that you feel more part of the community, having grown up in Scotland?
Yes, definitely, yeah.
In what sort of ways will that matter?
Well, Irish would be all around you, you know, and even get notes from school or anything, it's all in Irish. And I couldn't read any of it, so...
Yeah, and even road signs, I guess.
Road signs, yes.
Find your way around.
Yes.
Tina, is Ireland really bilingual? I mean, I know that you can have official documents now in Irish and in English and, as we were saying, road signs, but how bilingual are we?
Well, what we know from the last census is that 1.5 million people reported that they're able to speak Irish.
But some of that would be Conas-Táta, wouldn't it?
Exactly. We don't know exactly what ability that in Irish that covers. It's thought that there is a very substantial number of people here who speak Irish with reasonable fluency. And then another group who would be native speakers of Irish. It's one of the 2 official languages of the country, the first official language. So there are supports, state supports available through education and through the...
It's getting easier to learn.
Exactly.
So in Gaeltacht areas, how far do people go in the Gaeltacht areas in formal education, or is it the same everywhere?
Well, I suppose it's now more like other rural areas. There, in previous times, the Gaeltachtaí would have been particularly orientated towards farming and fishing and, you know, those sorts of activities. And they were very hard hit by emigration. They were the areas where life was very tough and, you know, people were much more likely to emigrate from these areas. And I think your parents would have been...
An example of that.
Yeah, a lot of people would be in the 50s. Yeah. But they brought their culture with them. They brought their Irish language with them. Mm-hmm. You know.
So could it be that there would be pockets of life in Glasgow or Boston where there's more Irish spoken than in the village that was left behind?
Well, certainly there would have been cases of Irish immigrants meeting up and forming, you know, their own communities abroad. And what's interesting that's happening now amongst Irish speakers is that they're forming those kinds of communities on the internet.
Yeah.
And they're reaching out to, that you've got, you know, Irish speakers in Kansas who are in daily communication with Irish speakers in Finland and Dublin.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's this whole other concept now of a community.
Isn't English the language of the internet, though? And does that pose problems for small, let's say, languages like Irish?
Well, certainly English is a dominant force on the internet, but you can Google in Irish, you can get spell checks in Irish.
Is it still called Google?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes.
Do you pronounce it differently?
No, I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
No.
And would you use the internet through Irish then?
As a dictionary, yes.
Yeah.
To look up words.
Grace, when it comes to using the language, for example, filling in forms, do you prefer now to use Irish or English?
Well, I would prefer English because I'm more familiar with English.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, according as your Irish improves, you'll change and use Irish instead?
I would like to think so, but I don't know. I think you might stick with what you're used to.
OK, we'll check in with you again.
Yeah.
What do the following have in common? Shopping online, depositing money into a bank account and paying your household bills. The answer is filling out forms, as we were just talking about. We all have to tackle forms at some stage, but the good news is most of them are pretty similar. Have a look at this and see.
We all come across probably hundreds of forms in our everyday life. Knowing how to fill in one form, like the form to join a library, makes it easier to fill in the rest. Like many forms, this one asks you to write in block letters which are easier to read. Again, like most forms, it asks for personal details first. So, Frank writes his name on the first line. There's room to write in a home address and a work address. Frank decides to give his home address, but you could give both. There's also room for 3 phone numbers: home, work, and a mobile number. Frank gives his mobile. The form asks you for your date of birth. Frank was born on the 22nd of July, 1981, so he writes 22 for the day, 7 for July, because July is the 7th month of the year, and 81 for 1981. The last thing he needs to do is to sign the form. Your signature is your own personal way of writing your name, and everyone's is different. As well as basic information about your name, address, and phone number, many forms ask for additional information, or they may ask you for information in a different way. If you want to vote in an election, your name has to be on the register of electors. You have to give the date of birth on your application form, and you must write it the way the form shows you. Someone born on the 22nd of July, 1981, puts the day in the first 2 boxes, 2 for the 22nd, the month in the 2 middle boxes, 07 for July, and 81 for the year 1981 in the last 2 boxes. There's also a section where you tick a box to show if you are Irish, British, a citizen of another country in the EU or European Union, or from a country which is not in the EU. If you find a form difficult, you can always bring it home and get help from a friend or family member. And don't forget that your local Citizens Information Centre is always willing to help with filling out official forms.